Okay, so today we're going to be looking at questions 44 to 49. Okay, we're going to call this the 45, 45, 90 triangles, and that's in reference of the angles. Notice how the 90-degree angle is marked, but I only mark one of the 45 angles, but it's really 45, 45, 90. There's formulas. There's formulas that we use. So I left the space here in 43 to work on the formula. How does the formula come up? Okay. I'm going to use this space. Now, one thing, I'm going to do two examples here. And like I said, from here, we should derive the formulas. After we derive the formulas, I'm going to be able to answer questions 44 to 49. So two things that I'm given. So let's say I have a 45, 45, 90 triangle there, and then I have another one there. In reality, because two angles are 45 degrees, two sides are equal. So I'm going to say I only need one side in reality to be able to solve for the other two sides. Let's say I was given that one side is 5. The legs are the two sides that meet at the 90-degree angle. So let's say that one is given. And I ask you guys to find the other two sides. The other case we could do is, what if the 5 is the hypotenuse? So I could give you guys one of the legs. The legs are the two sides that meet at 90 degrees. Or I could give you guys the hypotenuse. By just giving you guys one side, again, I'm looking at the 45, 45, 90. By doing this, you should be able to find the other two sides. The two sides that are going to be equal are the two sides that meet at the 90-degree angle, the two legs. So having that said, this is 5 as well. Because the two sides that meet at the 90-degree angle, the two legs of the triangle, are equal. So one of them is 5, the other one is 5. Now, the hypotenuse, my example at the left, the hypotenuse for right now, let me call it x. I know Pythagorean theorem. I know 5 squared plus 5 squared is equal to x squared. So I have that 25 plus 25 is equal to x squared. So that gives me that 50 is equal to x squared. So x must be the square root of 50. But we learned how to simplify that radical. I'm going to break this into two radicals. I'm going to break this as 25 times 2, because the square root of 25 is 5. So 5 radical 2. Okay, so let me cancel this x, and let me just call this 5 radical 2. Okay, so that's, I'm going to say it, use Pythagorean theorem if you forget the formulas. I'll come back to this in a minute, okay? I'll come back to this in a minute. So, but like I said, for right now, use Pythagorean theorem in case you forget the formulas. I recommend you writing side notes on your paper, okay? Now, for the other example, I'm gonna call, for right now, let me call this sides x, the two legs. I know they're equal, but I just don't know how big they are. So I'm gonna call them x. So using Pythagorean theorem, I'm gonna call this x squared plus x squared is equal to 5 squared. So I have that 2x squared, it's equal to 25. Look, I was adding on the left, so that's why I have 2x squared is equal to 25. So that means that x squared is 25 over 2. That means that x is the square root of 25 over the square root of 2, which simplifies to 5 over radical 2. Okay, we learned back in the days, back in first semester, we learned that we cannot have radicals at the bottom. So I see a radical 2, and it's not a perfect square, so I cannot just make it a whole number. Instead, when there's a radical at the bottom, I'm going to multiply top and bottom by radical 2. So on the top, I have 5 radical 2, and at the bottom, I have 2. I take a look at my fraction, my whole numbers. 5 over 2, nothing I can do. Simplify it if you can, but nothing I can do. So I just solved that this side was 5 radical 2 over 2, and so was this. Pythagorean theorem will be able to help us. Now, how can we do this faster? How is this formula? If you start from the side, from one of the legs, to get to the hypotenuse, to be honest, you're just going to multiply by radical 2. That's it. That's all I'm going to do. 5 times radical 2, 5 radical 2. So if you're starting from the leg, you're going to multiply by radical 2. If you're going backwards, you're going to divide by radical 2. Isn't that what we have here? 5 divided by radical 2. So if you're going backwards, if you're starting from the hypotenuse, you're going to divide by radical 2. No radicals at the bottom, so you have to rationalize that denominator. That means no radicals at the bottom. So again, if you're starting from the leg, you multiply by radical 2. If you start from the radical, you divide by radical 2. That's the shortcut. That's the formula. If you forget it, use Pythagorean theorem. Okay, having that said, let's take a look at number 44. I want to work from 44 to 49. In my example here, I'm going to ask you guys to solve, so find the missing side lengths. So I'm not going to ask you to solve for both. For your homework, I'm going to be specific. One side, you're going to solve only for one side. And I'll be honest, I'm not going to give you the easiest side. Okay, so you're only gonna have in your homework one side. My notes, I'm gonna solve for both. Now here, let me solve for A. Or let me solve for B, it doesn't really matter. I'm starting from the hypotenuse. So I remembered, when you start from the hypotenuse, you divide by radical 2, right? So I'm gonna have, the number that I have is 8 radical 2. But I'm gonna divide by radical 2. Cool thing is that those radicals cancel out, so I get 8. These two sides are 8. Okay, good, I solved for them. Now let's take a look at number 45. Cool, it seems like I'm starting from the hypotenuse again. And I know when I'm starting from the hypotenuse, the number is 3 radical 2. When I'm starting by the hypotenuse, I divide by radical 2. Nice, this is easy. They simplify to 3. So these two sides are 3. Remember, the two sides that meet at the 90-degree corner, the two legs, they're equal. So I'm writing the same number for both. Question number 46. If I'm solving for y is 10, right? The two numbers that meet at the 90-degree corner are the same number. Now, if I'm solving for x, I have to go 10 times radical 2. Remember, now here I multiplied because I'm starting from one of the legs. So 10 radical 2. A whole number and a radical cannot be combined. So my answer for x will be 10 radical 2. Remember how to type that in. If you have this, you have 10 rad 2. Oh, speaking of typing, how will you type weird fraction like that? You will type that, if you're typing this, you go 5 radical 2. Notice I just worry about the top of the fraction. 5 radical 2 over 2. Anything before the backslash, it's on the top of the fraction. Everything after is what's at the bottom of the fraction. Okay, so now we talk about graphing. Type. So let me come back to number 47. If I ask you to solve for b, that's easy, right? 9 radical 2 over 2. The two legs are equal. Now, if I'm asking you to solve for a, because you're starting from one of the legs, you have to multiply by radical 2. So let me work this out. 9 radical 2 over 2. Have to multiply by radical 2. In a fraction, multiplication, you put it on top. If you're dividing, you put it at the bottom. So I put it on top. So that gives me 9 times 2 over 2. Notice I multiply my radicals, right? Radical 2 times radical 2 is 2. Now, two ways how I can do this. How I can continue here. One way I can multiply the top. So I have 18 over 2, which is 9. All right, so A, if I was solving for A is 9. Another thing you could have done is just cancel out the 2's. So A equals 9. All right, 2 more questions. Let's take a look at question number 48. If I'm asking you to solve for y is 5. If I'm asking you to solve for x is going to be 5 times the square root of 2. Though a whole number and a radical cannot be combined, so 5 radical 2. Question number 49. I'm starting from the hypotenuse, and let me solve for A or B, doesn't matter. In this case, A and B are the same thing. So starting from the hypotenuse, I have to go 6 divided by radical 2. Now I cannot have radicals at the bottom, so let me multiply top and bottom by radical 2. So that gives me 6 radical 2 over 2. My fraction, the whole number, 6 over 2, we can do better. As a matter of fact, that becomes a whole number. That is 3 radical 2. So if I'm solving for A, it's 3 radical 2. If I'm solving for B, 3 radical 2. Again, there's the formulas. If you start from one of the legs and you're getting the hypotenuse, you multiply by radical 2. If you're starting from the hypotenuse, you're getting one of the legs, you divide by radical 2. Now, if you forget the formula, use Pythagorean theorem.